the debate if you cannot find the cited research. So anything cited must be available to the other team and the judges after the debate. If the judges would like to call for evidence, that is their right. So you must provide that. If it is not provided, it is considered excluded from the decision of the judges. Also, I want to remind the students, you may not communicate with anyone other than your partner on the stage. That includes your partners in the crowd. Do not communicate with anyone other than your partner on the stage. Yes. Maybe see if you Yes, yes.
不好意思，我提醒一下在场的各位，比赛即将开始，请大家把手机调成静音或者关机，避免影响到场上比赛的进行。再次提醒，比赛即将开始，我们请各位的观众将手机调成震动或者是静音，以免影响比赛的开始。
Straight to you.
Sorry. No, I want to ask them, the debaters. Would you like to know my preference? Because personally, I have preference. So I had mentioned this a lot of times, don't go too fast if you cannot articulate clearly, because if you speak too fast and I cannot understand you, then you lose my point. Okay, so articulation. Okay.
Do any of the other judges have any preferences?
Yeah. Would the participants tell us who the speaker orders are going to be? First speaker for Fuhsing?
It's Andrea.
Andrea.
Yeah. Well, my name is different.
So speaker 1 for Fuhsing will be Andrea. Speaker 3 is Evan. Ascent speaker 2 is Caitlin. You're going first for Ascent, correct? You're going first for Ascent, correct? It's just written strangely on here, so it's written first, second, and fourth. Caitlin is second speaker for Ascent. Okay. And Phoebe is first speaker for Ascent. Okay. Would Andrea please come up to the front?
If no one interrupts me, my time starts now. We offer the following framework. A just government must evaluate the consequences of its policies to ensure a sustainable economy and job opportunities for as many people as possible. Our first contention is inflation. UBI causes inflation. That's CFI 2023. The law of supply and demand dictates that as demand pressure increases on producers and retailers, they must increase prices on the available supply of goods and services to avoid being overwhelmed by the increased demand. That is inflation. If UBI turns out to cause uncontrolled inflation, then the cost of living continues to increase. It would necessitate an increase in the level of universal basic income provided to all citizens, or allowing the standard of living for UBI recipients to decline, as they are able to purchase fewer goods and services with the amount of UBI they receive. B. Inflation destroys economic growth and impedes investment. An unstable dollar undermines productive asset usage and thus eliminates job opportunities. Woodhill 14. The economy does best with a stable dollar. An unstable dollar interferes with our government's ability to create and utilize assets to produce our GDP and employ people, reduces capital investment. Less than robust 2012 capital shock. If capital productivity in 2012 had been as high as it was in 2000, 2012 our GDP would have been $2.1 trillion higher, and we would have been able to have full employment in 2012. Next, balance is key. Harrington and Shedd 20. A balanced budget is crucial for Taiwan for many reasons. For one, it reduces market risk and attracts foreign direct investment. It relies much on reducing risk to attract foreign investment. Another reason for Taiwan to maintain a stable balanced budget is that it's not included in any international or regional safety net, and it's left alone to fight. Deter the occurrence of capital flood. Taiwan has to increase tax revenue or cancel some existing means test benefit in order for UBI to happen. Next, risk companies offshore. According to Harrington and Shedd 20, Taiwan's value-added tax rate at 5% is significantly lower than the European countries and neighboring Asian countries. The increased price tag levied on taxable goods discouraged consumption and reduced sales tax revenue. This happened in Japan last year. If Taiwan decreases its tax, it risks companies and foreign investments moving offshore. According to Trading Economics, Taiwan's FDI averaged $572.48 million from 1996 until 2023. That's like the average. And our second contention is welfare. A UBI cost would crowd out other social welfare programs. That's Dodge 16. A UBI would be incredibly expensive. A 10,000 annual basic income would cost more than $3 trillion per year. Consuming all tax revenue, this would crowd out social programs. A basic income would leave low-income families worse off because federal dollars that are currently targeted toward the poor would be transferred to a universal program shared by the middle class and the wealthy. The poor and seniors would lose tens of thousands worth of benefits if welfare were to be replaced with UBI. Matthew 17. Funding a large-scale UBI require using funding from welfare, unemployment insurances, in-kind subsidies such as Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare. Everyone over the age of 65 would lose out. The poorest seniors would lose out more than $34,000 worth of benefits. Low and middle-income people will lose from $18,000 to $28,000 each. Current welfare encourages work. UBI empirically significantly reduces work, which keeps recipients in poverty, while taking money from the needy and giving it to the able-bodied adults. That's Rector 18. For each $1,000 added in benefits, there was an average of $660 reduction in earnings, meaning that $3,000 in government benefits was required for a net increase of $1,000 in family income. A comprehensive UBI policy would transfer funds away from the vulnerable to affluent person capable of self-support, eliminate Social Security and Medicare payments, and transfer funds in the able-bodied working adults. And for these reasons, we proudly negate. Thank you.
My time starts now. We have done the resolution. Before we start, we would like to establish a framework. We should base this debate on the probability because there's no use of talking about huge impacts if they don't happen, whereas we must solve those small ones too. If both sides have a high probability, we should go down to magnitude. We will also like to establish an interpretation. Because the resolution talks about how Taiwan should establish UBI or not, we can assume that establishing UBI in Taiwan is feasible, and the debate should be on the benefits and setbacks of UBI. Condition 1 is mental health. Webster 22 states that many have mental health issues, and the current system is failing young people. Most notably, this system is having a detrimental impact on their mental health. Specific to Taiwan, currently at least 25% of the Taiwanese population don't have the money to get medical care. However, the universal basic income benefits the current situation, as Western 22 continues to say that many say that UBI will have some positive impacts on their mental health. There are several non-financial benefits of UBI that can support young people's mental health, like reduction in social stigma, more personal independence, enhanced relationships, and an improved ability to plan for the future. Landman Economics states that UBI designed to meet minimum income standards will avoid or delay over 500,000 cases of anxiety and depression among young people, and for an adult would eradicate poverty and bring about tens of thousands of avoided and delayed cases of anxiety and depression. Some examples of the UBI increasing mental health are seen in the experiment in Finland. Our main impact is productivity. Increasing mental health within the working population benefits the entire economy as a whole by increasing productivity. The WHO states that without effective support, mental disorders and other mental health conditions can affect a person's confidence and identity at work, capacity to work productively, absences, and the ease with which to retain or gain work. In addition, depression and anxiety cost the global economy $1 trillion each year, predominantly from reduced productivity. The Mental Health Foundation continues by stating that addressing well-being at work increases productivity by as much as 12%. Therefore, by increasing mental health, by improving work conditions, and having a basic income for all, the productivity and GDP of the economy will increase. Contention here is education. UBI increases education in Taiwan for children. In the status quo, a majority of the unprivileged students do not have access to quality school supplies, or school supplies at all. Xiao Tony talks about how in Taiwan, 56% of underprivileged child do not have a desk at home. 80% did not have reference books. 59% of underprivileged students in urban areas and 70% of underprivileged students in rural areas did not have access to an electronic device. Meanwhile, 7.63% of underprivileged students spend no money on school supplies. UBI solves. This is because it gives students and their family the money to buy school supplies. Not only that, but we also have a Denmark example. Cherrick Twain states that look at Denmark, whose support for children lowers the level of childhood poverty and results in better educational outcomes for children. Denmark's child poverty rate is at 3% and has a child support program. As a result, Denmark has better educational performances. Our impact is threefold. First is mental health. Agate talks about how studies show that children having school supplies improve grades, creativity, attitudes towards learning, behavior, peer relationships, and self-image. Education is the first step to overcoming poverty. And second, education can solve poverty. Joe Betty 19 states that education is the best way out of poverty in part because it is strongly linked to economic growth. A 2021 study shows that 75% of the growth in gross GDP around the world was linked to increased math and science skills. Third, school supplies prevent high school dropouts. Wittgenstein 12 talks about how school desertion is one of the major challenges. Many schools lack school supplies and are a boring and depressing environment for the students. This is devastating as each high school dropout costs the economy $272,000 due to lower tax contributions, higher rates of criminal activity, and higher reliance on welfare. Remember, Judge, by providing the children of today with quality education and educational supplies, we raise an entire new generation of educated students. It becomes an endless cycle as the children of those children are able to have quality school supplies and education. Thus, we are proud to affirm.
The time will begin on my first word. Okay, so can you explain how you're going to fund for UBI?
We fund the UBI from taxes from rich people. So in your first convention, you talked about how companies will go offshore, and you gave an example of Japan, but Japan currently doesn't have UBI, so how does it relate to this topic?
Oh, we're talking about how Japan has tried to implement this temporary UBI thing, and also it results in an increase in taxes. So that's a part example. Can you explain how UBI is going to help mental health? Are they going to go to therapy or?
UBI is going to help mental health because first it provides them with they get money so they can reach out, and second it increases.
So you're assuming that they're all willing to reach out. Once
We're
they get
giving the people who are willing to reach out the money to reach out.
Okay. So apart from that, is there anything else?
And also like mental health is increased when they get money because they're not worried if they have like a bad job or like they don't get it. So they have less stress. Okay, so let's talk about your 3 trillion. So how much money is given to each person?
Per con. You guys are UBI.
Yeah, so how much do you think, like, for the 3 trillion, do you think you're going to be getting? So that it will cost $3 trillion. Because you talked about how it will cost $3 trillion.
We're saying you're going to cost $3 trillion
Yeah.
from UBI.
So how much do you think is given to each person? Actually, okay, you can answer.
Okay. You said there's 272,000 for dropout. Do you mean is that the overall statistic? And if that is, can I see your evidence? Sure. Wait, so is it the overall statistic, like overall for everyone? All college dropouts equal to 272,000 for the economy?
It's this one.
Where's the 272? Thank you.
Okay, so you talked about how like people will be like they will reduce work hours, but then if they get like more money and they get to like get more like they get more money so that they can like maybe double the amount they are making right now, then why would they actually drop out?
Oh, that's not one of our
I talked about how like people reduce work hours.
No, we're saying that okay, this is targeted specifically to people who earn less than UBI because okay, so if they earn less than UBI and they think that it doesn't matter for them as much to earn it doesn't matter for them to earn as much if they can just like stay at home every day and just get like as much money as they want. Not as much money as they want, like the same as if they work.
No.
Is this volume okay? Like, can y'all hear me? Because I don't really want to use the microphone. Yeah. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay. Time starts in 3, 2, 1, go. 3 things in my speech. First, I'd like to go on to clarification. Second, on extensions. And third, rebuttals. First, we contest the definition. This is a policy debate. The main debate should first be in feasibility. If the framework is probability, how do you claim it's not about feasibility? Because a pro would always win due to claiming that there will be 100% probability always in UBI. Now extending inflation. First of all, we'd like to establish 2 things. 1, only reason why other countries are willing to invest in NTD is because they trust that they will get the value that NTD promises. So the moment that our currency loses trust, countries will refuse to use it and immediately devalue our currency. 2, Taiwan is a unique case because the currency is very, very vulnerable. First of all, we already lack recognition as a country, but on top of that, we are also in a region of geopolitical instability and a Chinese invasion. This means that other countries won't be able to trust that our currency can maintain long-term stability, decreasing the trust in our currency. This is why inflation is so devastating because you collapse the entire economy once you actually have a ripple in inflation. Okay, so next, now I'm gonna go on to some tax. So first, according to SAE, total tax revenue in Taiwan is in 2022 is 2.4 trillion NTD. To be able to provide 10,000 NTD for all 20 million adults in Taiwan, you would need at least another 2.4 trillion. So the proposal is to double the tax. Why would this not work? To double the tax, you have to double the amount the rich pay in taxes, which according to Chow 23 is 40% of people who earn over $150,000. Double 40% is 80%, which no one would stay in Taiwan. They're obviously going to go offshore where they get 80% because this is most of their income gone. So next, going on to poverty. According to the Nation's Encyclopedia, poverty in Taiwan has almost been eradicated, with less than 1% of the population considered as poor or belonging to the low-income bracket. So we think that targeted welfare will be best at making sure that the government directs most of its resources to help those who are most in need, instead of spending more than $3 trillion on the 99% of the country who are not in the most vulnerable situation. An easy solution is to lower the poverty threshold to make it easier for people to pass means tests. According to Taiwan Today, the number of Taiwanese eligible for public assistance tripled to 852,000 when the government raised the poverty line in 2011. We tell that their plan is not feasible because there's an increase in tax revenue. Taiwan already has lower tax than the other countries. Raising income corporate tax drives up the cost for businesses. Using 2019 statistics as an example, it will entail reduction in both exports of goods and services and domestic fixed capital investments in Taiwan's GDP. Now going to answer their mental health argument, according to Saul Hill 16, most of the poor and jobless are lacking more than just cash. They may be addicted to drugs or alcohol, suffer from mental health issues, have criminal records, or have difficulty functioning in a complex society. Money may be needed, but it will not cure such ills. It is going to be way worse on their side because when they cut the mental health program in Taiwan to give people who we don't even know will use the money for their mental health, probably when you do that, when they have money in their pocket, they're going to use it to buy things and not go to a doctor for diagnosis. Now going on to education. Their statistic is actually 56% of people in poverty, which is around half of 1%. Therefore, it is more efficient for the government to help those in need through specified programs than pay $3 trillion for the 99.5% of people who already have sufficient resources for education. The people who lack educational resources are the people who are underprivileged, as their card states. But these people will not use the money to improve their mental health, but to buy things that they would need. It literally makes no sense for them to pay for school when they are lacking vital household goods and also food, and that is important for survival, right? Also the fact that Taiwan has compulsory education to go up to 12 years in school, which is the last year of high school, proves that Taiwan actually implements good educational policy. I don't think that their evidence is really unique to Taiwan because Taiwan has a standard to actually where you need to go to like 12th grade, or else and there's not going to be any more high school dropouts. So for all these reasons, please vote con. Thank you.
We have 3 minutes of preparation time. Is that correct? Is it fine if I use 45 seconds?
Yep.
Starting now. I used 50 seconds. Wait, okay. Is everybody ready for my speech? Do I need to use the microphone or is this good?
Just make sure you're loud.
Okay. My time starts now. First, I will be answering to the contention about inflation. First, basic income would put billions of dollars already in use to our economy to more productive use, rather than introduce new money in the market. It redirects money to help those in need and who will spend it on basic necessities, which stimulates our economy, creates jobs, and supports local businesses, says UBI Works 22. This means that Taiwan won't print money, they just redirect it. And second, since Taiwan is afraid of being isolated, they're very conservative about their debt because they don't want to fall into it. They designed their system so they pay back their debt. And third, Taiwan barely spends money on welfare. Taiwan is conservative with their money compared to the other countries that have similar cultures, such as Japan and South Korea. Taiwan has a 37.6% savings rate, top 10% in the world, extremely high. The tax rates and deficits are one of the least in the world. This means that the economy can't stand UBI and won't get inflated. Taiwan has a lot of savings for usage of UBI, so even adding UBI would make Taiwan an average money spender in the world. And additionally, even if you buy the argument on inflation, Taiwan saves 15 trillion NTD in other countries, which means that even if NTD was to go down, they still have a backup. Even more, UBI can increase productivity and decrease inflation. UBI increases mental well-being, and in our case already states that increases mental well-being would increase productivity, which would benefit the economy overall. And even if you agree with their point that you have to create money, people spend the money on useful stuff. This means that the money is put back into the economy and stimulates it. So the excess money does not increase inflation.
And even if you buy the point about how the pro-wall causes inflation, our boy at 23 talks about how inflation is good. Inflation makes it easier for debtors who repay their loans with money that is less valuable than the money is borrowed. This increases borrowing and lending, which again increases spending on all levels. And even additionally, it won't cause inflation because we get it by increasing taxes. Taiwan already has extremely low tax rates as quote Taiwan lowest bracketed tax rates for individuals, which makes it one of the lowest rates in the world. This means that Taiwan can afford to raise their taxes, and by raising it would just make them an average country in terms of spending, which is 23% in the world. And even now into what they talk about welfare. First, Huang 17 talks about 46.7% of Taiwanese people have 3,000 NTD of disposable income a month, and 74% earn less than 6,000 NTD per month. However, a study in Taichung shows that only 12% of people in need were able to receive the welfare they require. This is because to be eligible for welfare, you cannot be between the ages of 16 and 60. However, with UBI, everyone is allowed to receive the money. 10,000 NTD a month would be a huge help to those only earning 6,000 NTD a month, more than doubling their income. Judge prefer our court because it talks about Taiwan specifically. And they talk about how only 1% of people in Taiwan belong to the poverty line. Never mind. Also, UBI is much better than welfare anyway. Money is one of the only things where you can get anything you need. By using UBI, those in need can use the money to buy things specifically, whereas welfare doesn't specifically cater to the needs. Now I'll be frontlining to my contention. They talk about how if you increase the taxes, then the rich will leave. However, taxes are only around 5% in Taiwan, making it one of the lowest in the world. We can increase it, and it would be double, which is about 10%. It would still be less than the average in the world, which is 23%. And they also talk about how a 12-year education thing against our education contention. However, we're talking about school supplies, not the access to education. And plus, people don't even finish the 12 years because they need to work for money or for the house. And additionally, they also talk about military trade-off. They also talk about how we cannot spend money because of things like China. However, China has been saying that they're going to attack Taiwan for so long. However, they haven't, and they are not going to now because they've been saying it over and over again. However, have we seen an attack on Taiwan? No, we haven't. And by spending money on UBI, Taiwan can also make China doubt themselves, as it proves that Taiwan does not need to be worried about China all the time. It gives them, but that Taiwan can spend money on its citizens.
Ready for cross? Can I have the first one? Okay, time starts now. Okay, so you talked about school supplies, but I want to ask, like, if these people who like need school supplies, they're likely in poverty right now. So if they're in poverty, why would they want to care for any like school supplies? Why wouldn't they want to like first buy food, first ensure their survivability, then buy school supplies?
Even if that happens, if people can still spend money on food, this 10,000 NT, you don't spend 10,000 NT on food. You can spend a portion on that, things like desk and pencils and papers. And
wait. So you're telling me that like you're going to include an amount that's so much that you're gonna like include food, their survival, like maybe housing, and also school supplies? Is that what you're saying?
No, we're saying that school supplies aren't that expensive. So school supplies, we can use the money.
Do you know how expensive like having a desk is? You know how expensive like pens and like erasers like are? You know, if you buy a single pen, you're probably wasting like 50 NT, right? So like let's subtract that. 10,000 minus 50 NT. Now you're gonna like have like 9,900 and like 9. Okay, I can't math, but anyway, you're wasting a lot of money right now. So, and also, note that you're going to use this money on household goods, and also food. So, these people in poverty, they already can't really like maintain their survivability. They need to like find jobs. I'm pretty sure that these people, they probably need like this additional money for something else, right? Like, because if your main contention is about like buying school supplies for children.
No, we're saying that it can help give them school supplies. They can spend a little bit of this money on school supplies, which increases their overall mental capacity. Think about it. If you go to school without a pencil, you have to borrow a pencil for.
Sure. Two warrants to why that's literally false. First we tell you that like literally these people probably they can like okay fine they can't if you're saying that they can't borrow like pencils for like from other like classmates, then you're probably saying that you're wasting your money that can actually like increase your parents to have a better job. You're probably using that money on educational school supply that where Taiwanese schools, literally they have like, there's a quota to like reach at least 12th grade. So I don't see how these educational values would be better on your side.
No, we're saying that by having people have their own school supplies, it can overall, as we said as one of our first impacts, having their own school supplies. If you go to school without a pencil and then you have a pencil, it makes you much happier.
Okay, I literally don't bring a pencil and like I literally don't bring pencils to school. I borrow it from my classmates and they're perfectly fine with it.
Yeah, but that's because you can afford pencils.
Okay, fine. Yeah, sure.
And then,
your question.
Okay, now for my question, you guys talk about, in your first contention, you guys talked about Japan.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, we tell you that Japan has probably like a very similar economy, with Taiwan. We tell you that like oh wait, you mean our first argument or our rebuttal?
Yeah, you think about Japan.
Can you specify a bit?
You said.
Prep.
I'm gonna take 1 minute, 1 minute and 30 seconds to prep. I take 1 minute and 30. And prep starts now.
Just take it good.
.130 used. Top.
My off-time roadmap is going to be rebuttals, and then I'm going to do some impact calculus. Okay. If no one stops me, my time starts now. So for CEIC said that the total tax revenue in Taiwan is 2.4 trillion. So we need another 2.4 trillion in order to implement the $10,000 UBI, which means that you have to double the tax to pay for this. For the rich in Taiwan, that means that you double the 40% they already have to pay. And no one's going to stay if it's going to pay 80%. And now to feasibility, they did not contest this. Since this is a policy debate, the most important thing to vote on is the feasibility. As per our Harrington and Share 20 card says, Taiwan has the competitive edge over other countries because of the low taxes. Suddenly, the government wants to increase taxes to $3 trillion. We risk companies going offshore because Taiwan has lost its advantage, and this will lose 572.48 millions of USD dollars. This causes fiscal imbalances, which is bad for Taiwan because Taiwan is specifically vulnerable to economic instability because we don't have a safety net to fall back on. And they also said that Taiwan is conservative, which is proof that we cannot risk inflation. Okay, now to clarify what we said about inflation. So we need to get one thing clear. Our argument is inflation, demand pull inflation. It's not printing money. It means that there's going to be more money chasing the same amount of goods. What does it look like? It looks like a market where UBI has already been implemented, where there's more people buying the same amount of goods. When the producer sees that more people can buy the same amount of goods, they up their prices, which causes inflation. This is detrimental because it's the necessities like bread and milk and tissue that's going to be increased in price. And since they're the products that's going to be more in demand, and that's what the prices like people get UBI going to buy. Okay, also we solve for welfare. First, welfare is constantly improving. According to Taiwan Today, the number of Taiwanese eligible for public assistance tripled to 852,000 when the government raised the poverty line in 2011. This proves that it's possible for welfare to improve, and can increase the threshold to allow more people into assistance. And they said how like welfare is not specific, but that's actually completely the opposite, because welfare is specific, UBI is not. They got this wrong. According to our Matthew 17 card, welfare is for specific purposes such as social security and healthcare and all that stuff. And now moving on to impact calculus, we collapse on inflation. Versus probability. Judge, if you see even a little bit of probability of inflation and econ fluctuation, you should vote for con, as our framework states, because Taiwan cannot risk even a little of economic instability. This is my Harrington 20 card, which states that Taiwan does not have a safety net to fall back on. If foreign investments and companies see even a little risk that their value in the market is going to decrease, capital flight will occur, which means that they're going to pull out investments, which results in a less productive economy. We are a country that relies on foreign currencies to survive. We aren't recognized as a country. It is imminent for us to have a stable economy. 2 warrants for inflation. First, higher demand leads to higher prices because businesses know they can get customers as they have more money. Second, inflation isn't real. They say UBI is to give money to the poor to spend, right? Now suddenly the demand for a fixed supply is higher than it previously was because more money can be spent on the market. This increases inflation. Now onto magnitude. We risk an economic collapse from inflation and capital flight, which investors point out. They help less than 1% of the population because less than 1% of the population is in poverty. Now, we aren't saying that the 1% isn't important. We're merely saying that we outweigh because we affect people, since inflation is a global impact. Therefore, we proudly negate. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, we are going for our mental health contention. 25% of Taiwanese suffer from bad mental health, and UBI has solved this by reduction in social stigma, more independence, enhanced relationships, and planning for the future. We can see this happening in so many countries, for example, Finland. Mental health is so important as it increases both productivity and self-image. Now I'm going to go on to frontline. We talked about how people won't go to get help. However, we argue that we provide the money to give the people who are willing to reach out to the doctor. So we are just giving them the money when they are willing to use it, and they can use it on whatever they need, which is more useful than welfare because they get a choice as to what they want to use it for. And they also argue about tax. And however, the lowest taxing rates in Taiwan is like 5% for the very poor. And even if it's for like the rich, it's also not that high. So we can increase it, and even if you take their point about how it will double the amount of taxing, it will still be less than like the average in the world. And they talked about how like we don't have enough recognition and a safety net, but we are talking about a lot of places still give like Taiwan a lot of support. So that doesn't really make a point. And they're talking about how like feasibility is the most important factor in the debate. But Judge, even if you don't buy our interpretation, we talk about over and over again that we can afford it because first, since Taiwan is very scared of being isolated, they are very conservative about their debt. So this means that they designed their system so they would be able to pay back their debt. This means that spending a little bit more on UBI won't have any significant impacts. Okay, second, Taiwan barely spends any money on welfare. Taiwan is very conservative, as we said, and Taiwan has a 37.6% savings rate in the world, which is extremely high, which means that adding UBI would also just make Taiwan like an average money spender. And now on to inflation. Judge, even if you buy their point that the pro would cause inflation, our Boyle 23 card talks about how inflation is good. Inflation makes it easier on debtors who repay their loans with money that is less valuable than the money they borrowed. This encourages borrowing and lending, which again increases spending on all levels, which means that inflation isn't necessarily bad, which takes away their whole point about how UBI is bad. And now onto weighing. So we went on probability because our probability of our contention happening is so high since it happened in Finland. Also, if you give free money to a person, it just makes them like less stressed about like the workload and like the lack of money. So it means that they will be less stressed and like they won't be they have a higher like mental health. And so we win our magnitude because mental health always comes first. This because in order to have a productive economy, the people must be happy and have a good mental health. Right now, 25% of Taiwan needs help with mental health. Imagine the potential of Taiwan that we could have if we could help that 25% who are unhappy. Their magnitude is low because they never talked about how inflation is actually good, which they never talked about how inflation is actually good, and that it's not actually all bad. And thus, we strongly affirm the resolution.
Are you taking prep or are you going to start cross? Okay. Yeah, please. If you could, please.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. My time starts now. Can you tell us the 25% of Taiwanese who have mental health issues, like what causes these mental health issues?
We don't know that. We don't know what the cause is. We just say that 25% of Taiwan has mental health issues, meaning that by implementing UBI, we can help take their worries up to some cost, which...
How do you know that,
You're
though?
saying that...
You're assuming that.
No, you're saying that you're going to help people with mental health, but you don't even know what the cause of mental health is. So how do you even know that this giving them money and slapping them in the face are going to help anything?
And for all you know, these 25% of people, they could be caused from academic stress.
And also, it could also be maybe your family abuse. So how is money going to solve any of that?
If you care about how family abuse, by implementing UBI, you can give them money to escape the family abuse. Okay. We are just giving the money to the people who need it, and they can go to the doctor.
You're only giving money to the people who need it.
We are giving the money we're giving it to everyone, but then we're also giving it to the needed. Like the people who need it.
Aren't you giving everyone the same amount of money?
Yeah, so we also give it to the people who need it. We're giving to everyone, while we're only directed to the 12% of people who don't need it.
No, but that statistic is specific to Taichung's people that are homeless. The 12%.
Okay, then, but even then, 12% of Taichung people are homeless. That means 12% of the Taichung people don't get the...
So you're saying, so your impact is so small that only Taichung people, 12% of homeless Taichung people...
No, only 12% of the Taichung homeless people receive
okay, you can ask your question. Did you ask your question? Okay, you can ask your question.
Okay, so you talked about demand for inflation. Can you explain on that?
Okay, you can do that.
Demand pull inflation is basically when you have a lot of money chasing the same, a small amount of goods. So imagine, imagine everyone wants to buy a loaf of bread, right? And then now the bread is $5, and only 5 people can afford that. But now you give everyone UBI, so now there's a lot more people that can afford that $5. So now the demand for the...
How do you know that the people will want the bread?
Because they want food.
They need food. The fact that when you have UBI means that more people are going to chase after these little supply means that you're gonna have high demand.
Now you already asked your question. We're gonna ask.
Okay.
Can you explain why inflation is good?
Okay, inflation is good because we read in our...
Yeah, can you explain it in your own words, please?
Okay. So 4023 card talks about how inflation makes it easier on the people who are in debt, who repay their loans with
Is that Taiwan specific? Because I think we already gave Taiwan specific examples to how we literally can't risk inflation right now.
No, you're basically saying that inflation will help the people in debt to pay back their debt quicker.
Yeah.
How?
Because inflation makes it easier on debtors who pay their loan with money that's less valuable. Because it makes it easier for the debtors who repay their loan with the money
I'm
that's...
asking how.
By having them repay their loan with the less.
Alright, Fuhsing, you have,
Can you use the rest of our cup?
yeah, minute and a half, starts now. 10. All right. From the front.
Okay. So first on off-term roadmap. I'd like to give clarification, second impact calculus, and third weighing about time. Is everyone ready? Okay. Everyone's ready? Time starts in 3, 2, 1. Go. First, we tell you that welfare is already improving right now. According to Taiwan Today, the number of Taiwanese eligible for public assistance tripled to 852,000 when the government raised poverty line in 2011. The entire premise of pro-size government lies in doubling the tax. We prove it's not feasible, which is the most important part of the debate. They never defend the never defend that how they need to they don't have to prove if it's feasible or not, which is why we have to debate about if it's feasible or not, which means that if we prove to you, judge, if it's not feasible, we win this debate. This is what happened with tax increase in BAT. First, reduction in export of goods and services, which is 64%, and domestic fixed capital investment in Taiwan's GDP. That's a share in Harrington 20 card. Their UBI needs to double the amount of current tax revenue. If the rich are taxed 80%, who is willing to stay in Taiwan? Offshoring costs $500+ million from foreign investment. Their magnitude does not outweigh. Now answering to their mental health argument, Saw Hill 16 says that many of the poor and jobless are lacking more than just cash. They may be addicted to drugs or alcohol, right? Second, we tell you that Finland doesn't apply to Taiwan because there's different economy, demographic, and everything. They don't solve the problem because they don't show the cause of these mental health issues. These mental health issues are probably caused because they're in poverty, but then they're using this money to go to the doctor. It doesn't make any sense how they're gonna have enough money to support everything they have, support their survival, right? Next on to impact calculus. So, first on probability, Harrington 20 card says that Taiwan does not have a safety net to fall back on. Their evidence is not specific to Taiwan because we tell you that both Chinese invasion and relying on the foreign currency means that it's very vulnerable. The probability is much higher on our side as characterized by our previous speeches. Judge, you vote on it even 1% inflation because that's how fragile our economy is. They say inflation good because it helps people pay back debt, but it's completely false because inflation increases price while wages stay the same. Debtors will need more time to pay back the debt. Second, on magnitude. On their side, we think it's more helpful to help the 12% of people who have mental health issues in Taiwan with a targeted welfare system. So government can direct more resources to help the people who need it more. We outweigh because we actually help. We actually solve when we prevent economic collapse. This is why, Judge, please vote calm. Thank you.
All right, Ascent. 1 minute, 11 seconds. The prep starts now. Ten.
Now we're going for a contention about mental health. UBI increases mental health. 25% of Taiwanese suffer from bad mental health and UBI solves. Mental health is so important as it increases both productivity and self-image. They're talking about how the feasibility is the most important factor in the debate, but Judge, even if you don't buy our interpretation, we talk about over and over again that we can't afford it because first, additional tax on Taiwan is so low that doubling it won't do any impact. That shows that they don't have access to the impact because doubling the tax will just make it an average tax country because Taiwan already has really low tax.
And even more, Taiwan is afraid of being isolated, so they're very conservative about their debt, meaning that they designed the system to pay back the debt. That means they designed the system to be able to afford things like UBI, which means that we win the debate on feasibility. Now I will be going on to impact calculus. Probability. The probability of a concession happening is so high since this happened in Finland and practically every country has implemented UBI. They say that it doesn't count because they're different, but we tell you that they're both giving the same UBI, meaning that it will most likely increase their mental health because they're both giving UBI to their people. So it doesn't matter whether the economics say and other things about these countries as long as they're giving them UBI. And now to magnitude. Mental health always comes first. This is because in order to have a productive economy, the people must be happy and have good mental health. Right now, 25% of people in Taiwan need help with mental health. Imagine the potential Taiwan could have if we could help that 25%. The magnitude is so low because we talk about how inflation is good, which in Boyle 22-23 talks about how inflation is good, as inflation makes it easier on debtors who repay their loan with money that's less valuable than the money they borrowed. This increases borrowing on lending, which again increases spending on all levels, which increases the economy at the end. And scope. Our scope is huge. By having universal basic income, everyone in Taiwan will be affected, whether it means getting lifted out of poverty or having their mental health. And our impact also prereqs this. The moment someone hears that UBI is coming or even possibly coming, the mental health increases. This is because they know that help is coming and that they will have a safety net. Thus, we strongly urge a pro ballot.
All right, judges, you can take some time and let's all make our decisions before we start speaking to the participants. And I will remind you, I believe that we should not disclose who has won, so don't give any indicators of who has won, just give comments so that both sides know your general reason for decision, but the actual decision will be disclosed later during the final discussions. Okay? If you're finished, let's go ahead and give the ballot to CDPA, and then we will give our comments once everybody's given the ballots. Yeah, thank you. Okay, everybody's turned in their ballots. Fantastic. Okay, well, let's give a round of applause for the All right, I'll begin. So I'll start with comments for the pro. The first is, I think we need some better reasoning. We need to be prepared with our reasoning for why things happen. So if you're talking about mental health, where does the mental health come from? And I don't really think that it's you can reach out after you get the money, or that it's you can necessarily even afford a therapist, although that could be one possibility. More likely, it's that when you have financial stability, which you mentioned this briefly, it's just that it wasn't enough. When you have financial stability, that in and of itself allows you to make choices that are better for yourself. It allows you to think further into the future. You can plan better, and thus you have a more stable life. So I think in the reasoning aspect of your main contention, we need to get better at describing not just the idea, but why that occurs. The second is in terms of the examples. So you keep talking about Finland as an example, but I assume some of our judges who perhaps were not judging all of the tournament, they have no idea what you're talking about, especially if they're not familiar with UBI. And in fact, as the judge in this particular debate, I did not weigh Finland very much because you did not tell me how I should weigh Finland. It was not given any kind of context, and it wasn't described in terms of Taiwan. So that was a very weak empirical example in terms of this particular debate, since nobody has any idea what you're talking about in terms of Finland. The third is the education discussion had similar problems, and it got into, I mean, both pro and the con had some problems on the education thing, talking about pencils and things like that. That was the complete wrong way to go, and you fell down the rabbit hole with Evan, which was a mistake. You need to pull it back up when that type of thing happens, and you started defending the idea of the kids need pencils. So that was not the right way to go. Instead, you should think about how parents can change their behavior after they receive that kind of income stability. Well, we see that higher income families, they tend to have higher IQs, and you can control for other factors as well. Why is that the case? Well, when you have financial stability with a parent, they can also spend more time and mental energy on raising their child. So that has very long-term effects on the education of a child. So financial precarity, financial stability certainly has a lot of educational effects. And I can agree with you that you can also increase your educational spending in long-term planning for a child. Like, you know, if you're a middle-class family, some middle-class families can't afford to have tutors, they can't go to Fuhsing and things like that. But now you have an extra $10,000. You might start considering that when you're in the middle income bracket. You now open up a lot more possibilities. You can come to a debate tournament. You can do other events and clubs and things like that. So you can afford that. So that from the get-go, I thought that was not well reasoned either. And then finally on the inflation discussion, I thought that there was a lot of really great statistics that you're giving about why Taiwan can afford this, but it sort of got lost in the latter part of the debate. Okay, so you really do need to collapse on a particular statistic that you think is most important and tell me why that one really matters. So it's more like you kind of talk about some things and then you threw out the 37%, but you didn't really give me much context about why I should prioritize that in particular, because from some folks, that might not make much difference. If we have a high savings rate, why does that mean that the government, because I assume this is individual saving, why does that mean the government can thus afford if it's individual saving? What's the connection between that and a government's feasibility for implementing UBI? You need to make sure that you have that connection. There is a connection you can make, but you don't make it. And then for the con side, I'm kind of pointing out some of the same problems. The first problem that I'm having with inflation is that I don't really get an understanding of why Taiwan 1% inflation is going to collapse the economy. Because, and a previous judge also pointed this out to you, and I think we should have heeded that. I don't get that, and none of your evidence suggests that. I don't believe. I mean, perhaps the evidence suggests that a 1% inflation would collapse the economy, but I would doubt it because we have more than 1% inflation now. So, and that's a personal piece of information that was not entered into the debate, so the pro should have pointed that out. But nonetheless, you don't even prove that threshold, in my opinion. You don't substantiate that whatsoever, and I think that to make that kind of claim, you have a high bar for me, and you don't meet that bar to begin with. Okay. Number two is that in the summary, there was not enough discussion about their key arguments. There was not a lot of clash in the points about, I mean, education, I wasn't hearing much at all in the summary. Mental health, not hearing much at all about. And the point about like the contention, whether inflation is good or bad, I think Evan makes a good point in Crossfire that, you know, is your evidence talking about Taiwan or not when in the context of whether inflation can be good? I think that's a good thing, and that you can use some of your points about why Taiwan cannot afford inflation and why her point does not contextualize it in Taiwan. But that debate was never really had, and it cannot be made just in the Crossfire. It needs to start in the summary speech. So that's another problem for you. And number three is that when we're trying to clash on the two ideas of essentially it comes down mental health versus inflation, right? You've got to give me the understanding of why I'm caring more about inflation first versus mental health. There was not really much direct clash on that question. And what I mean by that is, I heard previously, I think Caitlin has this argument, that inflation itself is extremely bad for mental health. That would be a really compelling argument for me. It would turn a lot of the points that they're making. But you've got to contextualize it. You've got to work that out for me. I can't like unbundle all of that. So that's problematic for you. Now, I mean, I was tormenting over my decision because there is a lot of reasonability on both sides that I have to kind of give both teams because it wasn't fleshed out either way. So I'm kind of being forced to unbundle certain things for the pro and the con, and that's why I tormented and I kind of was hesitating on my decision. But ultimately, I am very proud of you all, and congratulations to making it to the finals. Oh, you have to clap.
Yeah, from my end, I'll start with con. I think overall good structure, good questions, good crossfire questions, except for the pencil one. And I mean overall, like it does help the judge to follow your flow, your arguments, and the presentation was clear and touching. Then now coming back to your arguments, I think as what Tyler said, you need to elaborate on how UBI will cause inflation, right? With more details. You mentioned that pricing part, right? Like about basic necessities, but that's not everything about inflation, right? And that would not lead to what you later mentioned about capital shock, about the retreat of foreign investment, right? So this is a huge logical leap. So yeah, you should elaborate on that part. And so I would say, apart from mentioning all these big names, big economic terms, maybe focus on explaining a few, maybe one of them, how inflation will lead to, let's say, the retreat of foreign investment. That's one argument straight sound. That's enough, right? Now I'm seeing a lot of big topics without understanding the causality or even causation. So that's a big problem. And I think for the rebuttal part, I think perhaps maybe you should exactly target on their reasoning part, right? How will UBI solve people's mental health problem? You addressed that briefly in your crossfire at the end, but that should have been mentioned earlier. As Tyler said, they didn't explain the Finland's case, nor did they elaborate thoroughly on how UBI will lead to, let's say, people improving their mental health support. Right? I mean, they did talk about how it will maybe allow them to afford therapists, but do you think that's really like how UBI will support the mental health of people? And now I have $10,000 a month, I'll spend all of it on therapists. Perhaps not, right? You should exactly mention on that prioritization part, right? And as for the impact part, also like what Tyler said, right? Your arguments drew lots of financial problems along UBI. You should perhaps elaborate a bit more on the magnitude part, right? Why are these problems important? As you would, I mean, that's literally the main impact of your arguments. But you've only mentioned one sentence of it, which was that you prevent the economy from collapsing. That's like, again, a huge leap. As for the pro side, good strategy on sticking to mental health, because that's obviously a powerful argument to, for yourself. And I would say again, right, explain the causality, causation, right? Why would UBI improve people's mental health? Not only because of the spending income, right? As what Tyler said, it's about that comfort, that certainty you have with a fixed income every month. Talk about it. And the Finland case, obviously, yeah. What does it stand for? I only heard that Finland has a UBI trial, and not even that, and then the mental health suddenly improved. But why? Right? Maybe this all the factor, right? And so overall, I mean, but the rebuttal part, I think you guys were doing not bad with the how to fund UBI. I did heard some numbers on, for example, how Taiwan's overall tax revenue amounts only 11% of our overall GDP or something, compared to a global 23% for developed economy. That's a good way to back your funding. But perhaps in the future, you should do more research to reply to the challenges on, let's say, the highest bracket of 40% tax. How will you be able to double that to 80%? Because it is insane to have 80% income tax, right? So how will you actually work out that 11% to 23% and support UBI? So I think at the end of the day, the debate boils down to three parts, right? Whether inflation is good or bad, whether mental health issue can be resolved through UBI, and then whether it's possible to fund UBI through increasing the tax. And that's exactly how I judge the final decision. And good job. I mean, it's crazy for your age. You guys are middle schooler, right? That's like pretty insane. So congratulations.
So yeah, congratulations you guys for making to the final. I'm going to frame my feedback into three sections, before the debating, during the debating, and after it. So first of all, before the debating, we all know that the topic that we have today is universal basic income. So it's quite usual and inevitable that we will get the discussion, debating into a lot of economy terminology. So if I were to prepare for this debating, first of all, I will equip myself with a lot of terminology and economy knowledge before you step into the court, so that it will really give you all the advantage that you have and others doesn't have. And then, so that's before debating. During debating, you guys need to slow down a little bit. So there's a heads up from Katie in the very beginning. Articulation is very important. You couldn't really pursue anyone if you talk too fast, and it's for the audience, 30 minutes of machine gun is very fatigued. So you need to know when to pace yourself, when to slow down a little bit, especially if you are talking the point of your first sentence, or you're giving up number, you're giving the number to the audience. Try slow down a little bit, let everybody knows which is the important part of your conversation that will really help you structure the way how you present and debate on the stage. And then I really need to tell you guys that it feels weird for me for some point that I see some problem for both teams, because I'm a business person. I understand all the terminology. So there are some weird statements. For example, Taiwan currency is vulnerable. I believe it's from Evan. Double tax is okay. Inflation is good. Sometimes the economy issue is so complicated that you couldn't sum it up with a single statement and a single sentence. I understand that Taiwan currency is vulnerable, but you got to give some supporting point of why you look that way. Because for me, Taiwan economy is good. Our currency, our central bank is controlling currency very well, so it's not as vulnerable as other countries. For example, the Turkish, they are suffering great inflation. That's what I see vulnerable. Inflation is good. Income level, you have to articulate the question. Why do you make that statement, especially for both pros and cons teams. So that's my feedback for during the debating. And after that, first of all, congratulations, you guys are making super impressive effort here. And consider your age, you're middle school students, that's very impressive. And you guys must know that the point of today. The most valuable thing of today is not who wins the thing, it's all the experience and all the learning process that you guys have, and understand your weakness and your advantage, and then you go back and you practice, and you come here again to be a stronger version of yourself. So that's kind of the feedback I want to give you guys. Thank you.
First of of all, congratulations on both teams to get so far. And I think what I have here probably would clash with the other judges, so I would just make like a quick feedback. I really appreciate your efforts of making your speech sound much clearer. And I can actually follow up this time. Everyone can, articulate clearly. Your delivery is very clear to me. So, good job on that. So, a quick feedback on the SciCon first. Building on what Tyler had just said, it's not that we are not saying that you cannot use the case Finland to compare to case Taiwan. Oh, sorry, it's your argument, sir. Sorry. Okay, going back to yours. We're not saying that Finland and Taiwan is not comparable, but you have to give us, like, on what level are you comparing them? Because I remember SciCon saying something like, Japan and Taiwan has similar economy kind of status. So this is what I expect from you guys. So are you comparing their similar economic kind of structure, or people here have similar mental status? That's what we mean by that. And going back to SciCon, yeah, the crossfire seems a little bit childish to me. And when you mentioned whether China is going to attack us, because it's not happening yet, so we can say it's whatever we want, but whether that is going to be, practical for debates, it's questionable. And please also define. Oh, you mentioned like the current welfare system in Taiwan. Oh, that's for the Sci Pro team. You mentioned that the current welfare system in Taiwan is weak. Exactly how do you define weak? Can you give me examples like, okay, this scheme is not helping people in what way, that scheme is not helping people in what way? So please clarify your terms. And when you say something like, we are giving money to the people who are willing to reach out, that sounds a little off to me, because what do you mean by people are willing to reach out? We cannot, using our observation or using any statistic to support or tell that, oh, this person is willing to reach out and that person is not willing. Because willingness is very personal kind of adjective to use here. And also, tax the rich. This term has been reoccurring to me throughout these 2 days, and I still don't have a very clear definition of the word rich. Do you mean like, okay, earning 10,000 Taiwanese dollars is rich, or a million Taiwanese dollars per month is rich? Define the term rich, and exactly how much are you going to tax these? Are people earning different incomes are going to be taxed the same amount or different amounts? And I need clarification on that. But overall, I want to say the good things. I like how you direct the debates into the comparison between probability and feasibility, so good job on that. And I also like how you question them on how you bring up like inflation can be good, but you can elaborate a little more, because inflation, we have mentioned this a couple of times, is a very, very, very complicated situation. A lot of causes can cause inflation. So you have to elaborate a little more, like, oh, we are talking about normal inflation is good, or any other types of inflation are you referring to? So yes, that's pretty much for my part. You guys have done excellent jobs, so 辛苦了.
Yeah, good debate. You should be proud of yourselves. This is comparable to any tournament that I judge in the States in terms of English proficiency, quality of arguments, research displayed. And I'm sorry that you're going to have to hear another barrage of comments, so I'll start with one general one and then 3 for each team. The general one is both teams, I think, are making the right move to try to weigh, and you even use the terminology of like magnitude and probability, but I think you've also displayed why it's a mistake to rely on those crutch words, because what you're doing here is not weighing in terms of comparing arguments, you're just using those terms to describe your arguments. In both speeches, by the pro and the con, you'll say like, we outweigh on magnitude because our impact is really big. Well, notice that you haven't compared it to anything. I don't really care that it's big, I care that it's bigger. At one point in time you say, our impact is really high probability, Finland proves, or whatever. Well, it doesn't really prove a comparison of the relative probability compared to the other team's impacts. And so both of you are doing a good job of describing your impacts, but you're not doing what weighing is supposed to do, which is comparing your impacts. And a lot of judges alluded to this earlier, particularly Tyler was mentioning, you got to do the work of comparing it for the judge. And the advice that I usually give is, what do you want the judge to write on their ballot? And whatever that is, you should just say that to the judge, and the judge's only role should be to transcribe that. Right? They're just taking your speech and saying, I voted con or I voted pro because, filling in the blanks. But we can't do that if the only thing you're saying is, I got a lot of arguments here, because the judge got to consider the other sides as well. All right, with the pro, my 3 comments. First is, I would restructure some of your arguments to be more about UBI good, and so that your offense is much more tethered to either the universality / unconditionality of UBI, or the problems of welfare as a stopgap solution to whatever the problem you're pointing out is. Because the thesis of your case can more or less be summarized as, there's some poor people and we gotta give them money. Which sounds to me like it's just begging for, why do we need UBI? Why not just retool or reform welfare? And as evidenced by the fact, by the end of the debate, you don't have like a particularly strong built-in reason in your case. Yeah, you don't really have one, right? So you want to pick reasons that are much more like universality key / welfare bad. And you've got some of them, like the stigma point I think kind of crops up here and there, but that seems like a secondary thought compared to all of your other stuff, which I can more or less summarize as, yeah, like just target those solutions better, right? So you need a more specific defense of UBI. Second, you have 2 turns against the, what I'll call the bucket of economic harms contentions that this con's going for. One of them is like, inflation is good, which, sure, I guess you can say that, coupled with more explanation / clarification of what you even mean by that. But you had an argument in your case that was just like, UBI leads to like 12% GDP growth or some like ludicrous number like that, but it was more or less uncontested by your opponent. That seems like it's a far more plausible impact and far bigger than inflation good. I would much rather you hear you talk about the sort of general economic benefits of a UBI, because GDP growth is like a much better way to capture just like the overall state of the economy than like looking at very hyper-specific variables here. And so it kind of prices in a lot of the negative harms that the con is going to bring up. Like if they talk about the negative effects of like inflation on the economy, does it really matter if like net GDP goes up? Because it's kind of priced in already. So I would much more gravitate towards bigger turns with much clearer and more plausible explanations. Finally, in the crossfire, the con basically asks, how do you pay for this? And they're obviously fishing for their like taxes bad argument. Well, I would just be like, not with taxes, right? Like if a lot of their offense is predicated on taxation being bad, I would just happily pick a random different way to finance it. Just like, doesn't matter what it is, because they establish like 2 minutes of taxes bad in their case, and they don't have enough time to read 2 minutes of whatever other funding mechanism you got is bad. So just like pick something that's totally different, and then all of a sudden like a lot of the cons arguments just kind of go away because they don't got to link to taxes anymore. And you can just be like, they paid through it for like debt financing or whatever. Hence also the problem with like predicating your case off of a particular funding mechanism that the other side can just be like, yeah, that's not how we pay for it, problem solved. Okay, for the con. I would echo what all of the previous judges have explained about like, you can't just debate about the economy in just like such jargon-laden terms without explaining what they mean. Inflation being, I think, the #1 example of that, because you're not distinguishing between like mild inflation, hyperinflation, any type of inflation in between. It seems obvious to me that some natural inflation is good, like 1-2% a year is like what the US Fed shoots for. But like hyperinflation is bad, and you gotta like tell me the difference here. 1% inflation causing the entire economy to crumble is just like not a plausible story to begin with. 2 is, your explanation of inflation does not really make a lot of sense to me. Like, the way you explain it in Grand Crossfire is like, if there's less poor people, they'll have more money to spend, and like that causes inflation. And first of all, I don't really think that's how it works. And second of all, you have a welfare program that you're advocating for that fixes poverty, right? So your explanation of they cause inflation because there are no poor people left kind of conflicts with your, we also solve the poverty problem. So I would retool your inflation explanation to be less like, dang, those poor people have money now, and like now they can buy bread. Like that's not really where I would lean towards. And finally, I think some of the best debating in this debate is the sort of like, is welfare good or not? Like, can we just adequately target solutions to target people? And one mild problem is you like cite a bunch of evidence from the US, like that Matthew 17 card is talking about like US specific welfare programs that do not exist in Taiwan. We're talking about like SNAP, the Supplementary Nutritional Assistance Program. Pretty sure Taiwan doesn't have that. But also, phrase this to be offensive. You're phrasing it defensively, which is like welfare can equally well solve the problems that that the pro team raises. But obviously there's always going to be some risk that someone falls through the cracks in welfare, right? Like that's just kind of how it's going to go by its nature. Obviously we can minimize the amount of people that fall through, but it's never going to be 0. So you want a reason to prefer welfare even if people fall through the cracks. And I think the argument that you advanced earlier in the debate was to just like welfare gives more resources to those that need it, and UBI is a functional taking away of resources from the most vulnerable and marginalized. Is that answer? Because you're pointing out like there are a bunch of different welfare programs that are targeted at people with different needs, but now everyone gets a flat 10K a month, but like for someone that's, let's say, disabled, doesn't have a house, doesn't have a job, they're probably getting more than 10K in benefits a month from the government now, and UBI is functionally reducing the amount of benefits that they get. And now that's a reason to prefer welfare, since it's more efficiently allocating those resources. Okay, I have other thoughts, but you can find me, and I've got like all of them written down, and I'll send these thoughts to you. Only thing I'll say is really good debate, an incredible round, and yeah, you should all be proud of yourselves.
谢谢大家。那我们再次给场上的选手以及所有的裁判再一次掌声。本次的英文语言决赛就到这里。好，我们也再提醒一下，本次的闭幕式将在5点准时开始。那请大家在稍后的时候再帮我们重新做一次报道。OK。谢谢。
Good job, man.